In the kitchen, a man throws a knife at the woman. The woman quickly stops the knife with her bare hands while grinning with a smile. The man continues to throw knives at her, and one of them nearly pierced her throat before she calmly snatched it. Not only that, in just 0.1 seconds, she can even deflect enemy bullets with ease. However, she was just a normal woman 3 days ago. She is Martha. Martha is at her apartment when her boyfriend unexpectedly bursts in making out with another woman. They kind of invite her into a threesome, so she chooses to break up with her boyfriend. The man claims she has no sense of adventure. In response, Martha throws something in his face. After breaking up with her boyfriend, Martha entirely exposed her true self. To lift her spirits, she broke out into a wild dance at the bar. We then meet Francis, also known as Mr. Right, gets hired by a victim's wife, but he kills the wife instead after already collecting his fee from her husband. Afterwards, Martha visits a supermarket where she accidentally knocks over a group of condoms and bumps into Francis. Francis quickly catches them. In slow-mo, she immediately falls in love with him and wanted to date him. Francis grudgingly agreed to her confession, which made him delighted that he had been taking her for walks. Unexpectedly, a shooter who was hiding in the shadows was pointing at Francis. Francis softly dipped his head to escape the bullet when he shot. As soon as the sniper started shooting again, Francis was dancing with Martha and dodging bullets. The sniper's gun jammed at this moment, forcing him to retreat. Everything else just happened so organically that Martha didn't even notice. Francis was an elite assassin and also a former CIA agent. Thus Martha had not yet recognized that she had just entered the gates of hell. Francis had a strange habit of dressing up as a clown to make his target more comfortable while they were dying. Francis kills someone who was not the target. He would rather execute the masterminds because, in his view, doing so would prevent others from getting harmed. This proposal of Francis ultimately leads him to lead the assassins group. Hopper, Francis's former trainer, disagreed with him. Nevertheless, in order to secure the information, he chose to kill Francis. Hopper had an assassin squad circling Francis at the hotel. For a perfect man like him, though, dodging hundreds of gunshots while dancing cannot be difficult. He moves so rapidly that his enemies run out of ammo. He sneaked up behind the killer and used a fire extinguisher to knock him out cold. Hopper made the decision to pose as the FBI in order to trick the local police into helping him find Francis when the assassin squad failed. In the evening, Martha and Francis were having a fantastic time when suddenly, the assassin Espinosa shows up. Espinosa was led outside by him. To attack him, Espinosa pulled out his gun. Although Francis didn't want to kill anyone today, but Espinosa pulled up a dagger and attacked Francis right away. Espinosa's attacks were all deflected by Francis. He took the dagger and stabbed it into his throat. The dying man tells him that more assassins would go looking for Martha. When he heard these things, he started to feel afraid. He drove Martha home after pulling out a number of knives and encircling her in his arms so she could experience the strength of each weapon. Martha was quite intelligent and picked up skills easily. Francis grabbed the knife and flung it at Martha. Martha quickly reached for the knife with her skill. She then easily handled the remaining 4 knives that came flying. Over time, she develops more assassination talents. Later, Francis got a strange call, and with a top-secret paper in hand, the man told Francis that he wanted him to assassinate the target. Assassinating this person was Francis's goal, but as he does, he pulled out the gun and shot the strange man in place because he was in no rush. Martha saw the incident when he was killing people. Martha shook with anxiety. She decides to end their relationship. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't explain everything to Martha. Later, after becoming highly enraged, gangster leader Richard scolds his half-brother Moon, calling him a trash. It reveals that Richard was the mastermind behind the mystery man Francis killed earlier. Richard ordered Moon, Vaughn, and other assassins to go Martha's house and kill Francis. He wished to execute Francis in front of Martha. Moon quickly called his henchmen and gave them the weapons. He deliberately sends a shooter by the name of Steve, so he could execute Francis. To cheer Steve up, Moon only sent a couple of his subordinates. In the meantime, Hopper also arrived at Martha's residence and tricked her by using a fake FBI identification. He claimed that Francis is evil, and he wanted Martha to assist him to kill him. Seeing what Francis did earlier, Martha reluctantly agrees. Hopper patiently awaited Francis ascend up the stairs in order to kill him. But when he raised his head, he noticed a grenade landing. Hopper approached the grenade immediately because he knew it was an assassin's tool. He had taught Francis how to use grenades to draw an enemy's attention before killing them. Hopper misreads the directions this time, so Francis unexpectedly emerged behind him and stunned Hopper with an electric rifle. Then he dragged Hopper inside Martha's home. He made an effort to win her trust so that she would keep loving him. He even assured Martha that he would never kill anyone. Martha saw Francis's sincerity and decided to keep things going. But in the meantime, Moon had his assassins gathered around their home. Martha permitted Francis to carry on killing because she was worried he could get wounded. However, he continued to make an effort to uphold his word by getting Martha out of the house. Francis was being attacked with a baseball bat by an assassin, but he quickly snatched the bat and knocked the attacker unconscious. He then leapt from the stairs and stole the man's weapons. He pursued assassins relentlessly and turned to kill Steve, but he remembers his pledge to Martha. The moment he attempted to move Martha away, Steve opened fire. He used his hand to deflect the bullets in order to shield Martha. Francis had a strong defense, thus his injuries were minor scrapes. He pointed his rifle in Steve's direction, but Steve was ultimately spared. Steve was shocked by this. Steve vowed to Francis that he wouldn't kidnap Martha. He was then ambushed by a bunch of assassins using cutting-edge weapons who had just arrived. Francis simply found a location to hide with Martha, but he was unable to launch a counterattack because he was prohibited from killing people. He merely needed Martha's permission to shoot and kill people, which she finally gives. Francis looked for a target and then shot the assassin right away. Francis also tried psychological tricks to persuade Vaughn and the other assassins that they wouldn't be reunited with their wives and kids if they die here. In fact, the psychological attack was so successful that the assassin got up and fled. After that, every assassin was eliminated. Vaughn got to his feet and extended his hands in submission. To get Francis to stop shooting, Vaughn even insulted Moon in front of him as a bumbling moron. Steve suddenly hit Francis with a baseball bat at this precise time, causing him to collapse to the ground. They planned to take Martha to Richard while leaving Francis alone. Hopper also returns to the location. He started shooting, taking out every assassin. But when he turns back, Francis was already gone. At the mansion, Richard was furious that Vaughn had taken unnecessary steps to kidnap Martha. He beat Steve and Vaughn because he was so furious that he hadn't yet killed Francis. Richard was still unable to relax, so he gave Steve handle Francis an arm. Moon also took Martha into a dark room. Even though Martha was restrained, she showed no sign of being a coward. She insulted and cursed at Moon and Vaughn. Vaughn slapped Martha in the face fiercely, but she responded with a wicked smile that she would personally kill him and Moon. Vaughn kicked on Martha hard, believing she's talking shit. Steve was gathering weapons outside the mansion when Francis unexpectedly appeared and pointed a gun at him. Steve then stood back and watched as Francis peacefully consumed his candy. Francis pulled out a gun and started firing nonstop at the mansion. The bodyguards inside the house were in a complete panic. Francis was moving so quickly that they were unable to spot him. He used this opening to barge inside and start shooting, injuring several bodyguards. Richard quickly put up his hand and gave up. Vaughn wanted to keep attacking him, though, and as a result, his weapon jammed. He gently grabbed Vaughn's gun and pulled the barrel with a few light motions. To clear up the confusion, he spared Richard's life because he didn't want to harm anyone. Vaughn, however, strongly disagreed, stating that he wished to remove Richard as gangster boss by taking his position. Francis left the room after fully realizing the situation so that Vaughn and Richard could kill one another. Vaughn fires Richard like into a wasp nest. Francis easily avoided a bodyguard as he hurriedly went upstairs. The bodyguard took up the grenade, removed the pin, and tried to toss it at Francis, but the size of his room made him frightened. Francis knew he would also die when the explosion will go off. Francis showed no sign of fear. He replaced the pin onto the grenade. He encouraged the bodyguard as he sat down. Steve once more pointed the gun at him, but Francis put down his gun this time, declaring that he didn't want to shoot Steve. Steve put down his gun because he thought Francis was a good man and considered Francis as a friend. Immediately, Francis ran into the dark room to save Martha. Hopper arrived out of nowhere and knocked him to the ground as soon as he took Martha away. Martha was also grabbed by Moon and taken hostage. Hopper throws some wild punches at Francis. After that, the Hopper pulled a steel rod that smacked Francis repeatedly. Francis, however, created an opportunity to steal a steel rod from the Hopper and attack him in the rain. Two people engaged in combat until they tired out. They ultimately collapsed on the ground. Francis, who was unable to kill, turned away from Hopper and got ready to go. As Hopper prepared to shoot Francis, a gunshot was heard. It turned out that Steve fired at him, killing Hopper. On the other side, Moon prepared to battle Martha by pulling out a knife. Martha dodged his strike right away by using her assassination skills. She then suddenly punched Moon, eventually sending him to the afterlife. But that wasn't enough for her. She also intended to hunt down and kill Vaughn. Vaughn suddenly appeared in front of her and started shooting. Martha tilted her head, moving faster than Bullet in order to dodge it. She turned the barrel back on him, and Vaughn died as well. After leaving the mansion, she ran into Francis, and the two of them shared some candy before departing. 2 months later, she and Francis traveled to Vietnam to eat pho. They were targeted by a sniper. But the man suddenly notices that Martha has vanished. Martha appears next to the bad guy with a gun aimed at his head, and she pulls the trigger.